Philadelphia and then came this way, 1766. So I'm 16 years old. And we're not sure who he came with or whatever, but he's living in this area in 1766. And in 1766, your only neighbors in this area are wolves, panthers, bears, and Indians. Very few other settlers. But John is living here. He builds a cabin along Washington Pike, probably in Collier Township. Okay, about 5 miles from Pittsburgh. So he lives there and probably just kind of gets acquainted with the area, just survives. You know, so he probably has to grow his own food and do whatever he needs to survive. In 1774, he gives up his Collier land to Isaac and Gabriel Walker, and the Walkers settle there. And Settlers Cabin Park, which you've heard of, there's a cabin there that belonged to Isaac Walker, so there's a connection. But John joins the Washington County Militia during the American Revolution and serves there. Now, in this part of the world, he served locally, but there's no British Army here. But there is a threat from the British in the sense that the Indians are being fueled by the British to attack settlers, and that's what the war took place out here. And an example is in 17, and where John Henry is mentioned, is in 1782, the Walkers, Gabriel Walker, who's living out this way, he's living here with 7 children, his wife, and what they call a bound boy. The bound boy is basically indentured. He's someone else's son, and they can't afford to keep him, or his parents are deceased, whatever. And he's working. He's living with the Walkers. They provide him his food and whatever, and he works for them. But he's a young guy. So they're all living here. A party of 25 Indians in the area and pick the Walkers. Notice that this looks like this is the one we want to attack, and so they scout it out, but they happen to notice 2 travelers coming through that are with the Walkers, and they're armed. So the Indians hold off and they wait until the travelers leave. Then they make their move. Well, the 5 of the Walker children are and the bond boy are out in the field. They're cutting timothy grass, which is used to feed cattle and horses. They're doing their chores. Their father's heading out to the field to join them, and when he notices, he sees the Indians lurking, and he knows what they're up to. Yells to them to run, and he himself takes off. Well, the bomb boy takes off in one direction, but the 5 kids don't make it. The Indians get them. Gabriel Walker himself heads off, and he heads for Ewing's Fort, which is where which is a fortified place that they all know. They know if something like this happens, that's where you should go. Mrs. Walker's in the cabin with the two youngest, a baby and a very young child. Takes both of them, and she's able to hide and escape to head to Ewing's Fort. The Indians ransack the cabin and burn it. And then they take the 5 children. Their plan is to go down to the fort and attack it. But once they get there, they realize that the fort is a little stronger than they suspected, and they choose not to do it. But before they go, the 2 youngest of the Walker children they have, they're about I think 8 and 6, or 8 and 10, something like that. They kill and scalp them right in front of everyone in the fort, and leave the bodies there, take the scalps and the other 3, and head it northwest. Okay. Well, word gets around about this, and men start forming at the fort, and there was a captain of militia was there and his men, and they were there at the fort, and they decide that they're going to form a party to try to rescue these 3 children. John Henry is elected to lead the party, not the militia captain, but John Henry. For what reasons? Could be any number of reasons. He knows the walkers. He's very skilled. During the time period, there's some question: is this Virginia or is this Pennsylvania? And the militia officer may not be able to do that because is it in Virginia or is it in Pennsylvania? He can't. But John Henry is chosen, and he's chosen by the other men. He's not appointed. They feel he's the man to do it. So he leads the party of 50 men. They head out in a northwest direction to try to track them. Well, the Indians are very careful and try not to leave tracks, but along the way they do burn another cabin, and at one point they stop to eat, and they eat dried green corn, and they leave the husks there. So that's a clue that they're in the right direction. But John Henry's leading the party, but they don't want to get ambushed either. So they're trying to find their trail, but they're also trying not to be, attacked themselves. Well, they follow them, and they get to the Ohio River. They get to the Ohio River. Across the river is Logstown, which is an Indian village, which is Indian country. Anything north of the Ohio, west of the Allegheny River, is Indians. There's not white settlers living there. When they get to the river, there's a canoe going across with Indians in it. They fire on the canoe. They kill one and wound another one. But they assume that the rest of them are on the other side of the river, and they obviously don't have any way to get across. They know that they give up the pursuit at that point because they know they can't get them. They find out later that the children were on the same side of the river as the rescue party, and the kids tell them later that the rescuers were so close we could have almost touched them. The reason they didn't was the Indians had them hidden and threatened to kill them if they shouted out. But that's how close the party came. John Henry came to rescuing the 3 of them. So what happened? So the Indians got across the river, and then they could go. They knew they weren't being followed. They ended up going to. They took the 3 children to Detroit, to the British garrison there. They have the account is that the children, the 3 that are alive, had to clean the flesh off the scalps, so that they would last to take them to Detroit. Anyway, so the Indians take the 3 children and 2 scalps to Detroit. Probably got paid for them because that was the British at Detroit would pay $8 a scalp. So they have 2 scalps and 3 prisoners. British keep the 3 children prisoners, and then 2 years later they're exchanged for British soldiers in a prisoner exchange, shipped to Philadelphia by boat, and then the children come back across the mountains and reunite with their parents who have given them up as dead. They thought they have to be dead. So you can imagine their surprise. But John Henry led the party, and there's lots of other accounts of John Henry having to deal with Indians and scouting and whatever. Well, John ends his military career, and he's given a land patent of 406 acres. That's the way they paid people for their service in the American Revolution, by giving them land. They didn't have cash to give them. So he got 406 acres in what is now Twin Hills section of Mt Lebanon, where he established a farm, and the farm became known as Henry's Park, and he lived there. His closest neighbor was Alexander Carnahan, and you might recognize Carnahan's name. Alexander Carnahan is also buried here. So John Henry's neighbor is buried here.
How close was Carnahan to?
Well, I guess their property adjoined. Where exactly at, I'm not sure. But
Where were the houses? Because isn't it off of Green Tree Road? There's a Carnahan Drive.
yes.
And that's a pretty far piece from Twin Hills.
But but like I say, he had 406 acres.
Oh, okay.
So,
but it wasn't like, okay, I live here, and his next neighbor was like in Mt Lebanon, Washington Road or something.
Yeah, they're relatively close.
Yeah, you have a lot of land between them.
Yeah, a lot of land between them, right.
Is that this monument here one of the ones that the government replaced? It looks so new.
Yes, because he was a veteran, just like this man here.
Yeah.
So because he was a veteran, his gravestone was replaced.
Oh, okay. So, but this man, they have that big Glen thing down.